I'm just curious as to where he gets the authority to make such proclamations and basically push these policies. He's been asked more about politics than science.
You know, I think his degree of arrogance is astounding. The fact that he would argue that any attack on him is an attack on science. You know, it conjures up images more of the medieval church, when the medieval church was repressing science and the medieval church decided what science was. See, I don't think science really should ever be under the edicts of, government dogma. And that's sort of what it's become, is you can't question Anthony Fauci or you're questioning science. It's basically an attempt to immunize himself from any kind of criticism. The problem is that he's often ignored the science to be in favor of mandates that actually contradict the science. So when he's coming forward and saying everybody should be vaccinated, mandatory vaccination for children, he's doing that because he's ignoring the fact that over 100 million Americans have already had COVID. He was asked about natural immunity. He says, oh, that's interesting. Someone should look into that. He's disingenuous. He's dishonest. He's lied to Congress about the gain of function. And we've actually referred him formally for charges from the Department of Justice. We think that he has lied to Congress and committed a felony by saying that they did not fund gain of function research in China when indeed they did.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot of faith in Merrick Garland actually pursuing that, which I want to get to here in a moment. You mentioned the vaccinations for kids. One of the things that, Senator, that I haven't been able to find is what kind of data points has anyone at CDC or WHO or NIAID or NIH or wherever, what kind of data points in terms of safety have they been able to give parents? Because I sort of feel like these are the same bureaucrats that messed up lockdowns. These are the same bureaucrats that were funding what was supposed to be one of the safest virology labs in the world. Clearly it wasn't. I don't think that their definition of safe matches mine. So I'm just kind of curious when they say that these have all gone through this safe and thorough process, what is that?
Well, the interesting thing is when they've studied vaccines in children, any children that have already had COVID, that have already had the flu, are excluded from the safety trials. The reason they're excluded is because they already have immunity and they couldn't prove whether or not it helped them prevent them from getting the infection because they've already had the infection. But also as a consequence, we can't necessarily say it's safe in children who have already had the disease naturally because they're excluded from the studies. We want to know this precisely because children or adults who have already had COVID get an extremely strong response to a vaccine. That might be good, but it also might be related to some of these autoimmune reactions or these inflammatory reactions of the heart they call myocarditis. So we really would want to know, and in fact, I think it's malpractice to offer vaccines to kids without first asking or testing them to see if they've already had COVID. Because frankly, if my kids have already had COVID, I think it actually might be a danger to vaccinate them. So giving the vaccine without knowing whether someone had COVID, I think actually is medical malpractice.
And it's a shame that we can't even have these discussions without someone saying that it's anti-vax simply by asking questions, which it kind of blows the mind. I wanted to get to the point you had mentioned just a little bit ago, charges for Anthony Fauci and whether or not Merrick Garland's DOJ is going to follow up on this. What really I think shocks me more than anything, and perhaps I think every other American taxpayer, what in the world were we doing, Senator, funding this stuff with the Communist Party of China at a lab that the CCP ultimately has oversight on?
Yeah, what an incredible lack of judgment. And even since the pandemic arose, Fauci's been asked, do you trust the Chinese? Would we do this again? Or should we continue funding this lab in China? And he steadfastly argued that we still should fund research in China and that we still should collaborate with the Chinese Communist government. I think that this shows incredibly poor judgment because I think that we could get a worse pandemic. I think this may be the warning sign that if we don't really understand and learn from this, that we could get another pandemic that comes from a lab that maybe has 50% mortality. What if you release a virus that is man-made that has 90% mortality? I'm not alone in this. There are scientists who are not Republicans. There's a prominent one from Rutgers and another prominent one from MIT that are experts in this field. They're not partisan at all. They're not sympathetic to Republicans probably at all, that are saying that this kind of research is sort of risking civilization's very existence. Those are pretty strong words from nonpartisan scientists. And yet we've not had one committee hearing to investigate the origin of the virus or to investigate whether or not funding gain-of-function research where they have man-made viruses that are of unknown potential that they put together, and then they discover, hey, wonder if we can find out if it has increased infectivity in humans. That's a terrible idea. And the thing is we're still doing it. Fauci's still for it, and on that alone, he ought to be fired.
I can't, Senator, I can't for the life of me think of what medical advancement could be gleaned from this other than to use it as a form of biowarfare.
Well, and particularly now, because you might have made an argument, oh, we're going to look at viruses and predict what they would be like before they occur. But the problem with that argument is that the laboratory created viruses are not necessarily what will come from nature. Because this is a random mutation where you have thousands and thousands of possible mutations, the chance that you invent something in the lab that's the same as what will occur in nature is virtually zero. The other thing is now that we have the mRNA virus, we can sequence the DNA sequence, the genome of a virus within days, and create vaccines. We don't need to sort of say, oh, we've already got it growing in a laboratory somewhere, because we can immediately sequence things that occur in nature. That's a good idea, to sequence the DNA and the genome of an existing pathogen. But to take an existing pathogen and randomly combine it with stuff we find in a bat cave, other viruses in a bat cave, to see what happens is incredibly stupid. It's a Russian roulette for the world. And I can't believe we haven't gotten more Democrats interested in this, because literally we could cause a virus or create a virus that could destroy the world.
Yeah, Russian roulette indeed on this. Do you think that Merrick Garland the DOJ is going to bring charges? Are they going to listen to your requests?
No, I mean, this is the DOJ Attorney General now that's investigating parents. I mean, we tweeted an article out today of parents that were arrested in their home for protesting at a school board meeting. So no, I don't believe that Merrick Garland has any ounce of propriety, any ounce of probity as far as trying to do something to find justice here. I don't think he will. I think he's a political animal, but he's also a dangerous political animal in the sense that he is now sicking law enforcement on parents who are critical of what's being taught their kids. So I don't have any belief that he will actually do anything. But I do believe Fauci broke the law and he ought to be prosecuted. But at the very least, he ought to be removed from office for such bad judgment in still trusting the Chinese after all of this.